What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. When I set out to do this, I started in the Trump administration way back when. And I wanted to take shots at both sides, because that's kind of the philosophy. And the red and blue make it purple. But I got to say, Trump's not perfect. And it's not, it's not all going smoothly. But, man, after what we went through with the last 4 years under Biden and just the far left running the show, I'm so glad we're getting back to some sort of normalcy, some sort of just operating out of common sense. There is no room for hate in this world, but jokes and little comments here and there, they're not as bad as people want to make them out to be. And quite frankly, I think Trump is doing something that is long overdue. And that's Iran, and that's where we're going to start. So let's get to it. For decades now, Iran has funded and instigated violence and death across the globe. China, North Korea, they like to mess with people. A lot of times it's cyber crimes. Some people don't even know this, but most of North Korea's ballistic missiles are funded by crypto scams and crypto theft. But, if Iran was to get a nuke, they would just be reckless. Most of the countries that have nukes, in fact, all the countries that have nukes, they use it as a deterrent. But Iran, with their whole attitude of war until everyone is Islam, that scares me. And it should scare the whole world. But those wimpy little Europeans rather virtual signal and let the U.S. handle it. Hold our beer and please don't stop. Iran has been punishing a lot of these countries like the UAE, the United Arab Emirates and some of the other countries. See, what they want to do in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries now is they realize that natural gas, petroleum, and that kind of stuff is somewhat of a dying business. Somewhat, okay? So they've been diversifying, into different sectors to, keep their economy going. And I applaud them for it. One of those countries, the United Arab Emirates, is mining and processing aluminum. Iran sends a missile up its ass. What the hell? You're going after your Arab neighbors because they're not Muslim enough? Because they support the United States, or at least let us use their bases? But, it's coming time that these Arab nations get involved with the war against Iran. The United Arab Emirates is already signaling that they're getting ready to enter, and if they do, Saudi Arabia is not far behind them. Which means at some point we're going to have Muslim pilots flying along with Israel to bomb Iran. Because, just like I consider myself a Christian, I'm not one of those hardcore Christians who believes that, all whatever. What hardcore Christians believe. But it's the same with the Muslims. They don't all believe that we need to fight the world until everybody's Muslim. But what did Biden do? What did Bush? What did Obama do? They sat on the sidelines, but not Trump. He knew that the time was upon us. And despite resistance from his own party, MAGA, if you want to call it that, he did what had to be done. He had to attack them. They were getting too close to a nuclear weapon. Okay? Obama and Biden continued this policy of appeasement towards the Iranian government. They were allowing them to sell oil to keep their economy going as long as they didn't make a nuclear weapon, and they just continued making nuclear weapons. In the UN, are we really going to look to the UN for help? They're so impotent, and anything that they tried to do would be vetoed by China or Russia in the Security Council, and even if it passed, it would just be feeble. It would be a half-hearted virtual signaling. Look, we sent 12 soldiers over there. And NATO? NATO formed after we saved the world from Hitler, right? Feckless sissy boys and girls. Toothless, flameless dragons. But that doesn't stop the Daily Beast from, using the European wimpiness to try to, smear Trump. Their headline, Trump threatens jaw-dropping revenge against allies who humiliated him. Yeah, and he has floated the idea of pulling us out of NATO. We are the backbone of NATO. But Trump, when speaking to the Telegraph, said, The NATO is a paper tiger for not helping the U.S. in the Middle East conflict or reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And U.S. membership will not just be reconsidered, but it's beyond reconsideration. As he says, quote, I was never swayed by NATO. I always knew they were a paper tiger, and Putin knows that too, by the way. Yeah, when Russia attacked Ukraine, we sent what we could send, right? We sent billions of dollars. We sent tech. We sent whatever we needed to send. We were helping to protect Europe. But as it goes on right now, Italy refused to allow American bombers to use the military bases that they have there. That's great. That would be a great place to launch them for. France has blocked Israeli planes from flying weapons through its airspace. Spain says it's going to close its airspace to American aircraft involved in military actions and would not allow the U.S. to use its military bases for the war. Wow. Like Trump says, he believed that NATO help in the U.S. in conflict should be automatic, even though NATO is intended to be a defensive alliance and therefore has no real need to assist Trump with his war in Iran, adds the Daily Beast. You see, that's the way these liberal rags run. They have to say, oh, well, NATO shouldn't have to help. Okay. Like Trump said, we've been there automatically, including Ukraine. Ukraine wasn't our problem. It was a test, and we were there for them, and we would always have been there for them. They weren't there for us. Right? Trump also lashed out at the U.S. allies, such as the UK and France, on Tuesday for not helping end the Strait of Hormuz crisis. And, of course, the Daily Beast adds, he is responsible for starting. He's not responsible for starting this. Iran has been chanting death to the USA for almost my entire life. I think I was 11 years old when the revolution took place. The revolution. Other than the American Revolution and maybe the French Revolution, I ain't seen too many revolutions end up well. But anyhow, the Daily Beast goes on to say, in an unhinged Truth Social post, the 79-year-old president, I've noticed the media likes to point out that he's 79 because Biden was too old, so Trump must be too old. What a bunch of feckless sissy boys. Seriously. Anyhow, in an unhinged Truth Social post, the 79-year-old president suggested countries affected by the oil crisis stemming from the closure of the shipping route should, quote, build up some delayed courage, go to the strait, and just take it. Yeah. But meanwhile, Britain's whole appeasement thing is not working out well. Iran uses proxies, basically like the gig economy. Like instead of an Uber or Uber Eats, they have terrorism. They burned down an ambulance service. It was a Jewish ambulance service that served the local community regardless of religious affiliation, but they burned it down. There was Iran International Security Director. I believe they're a newspaper, and he said the threat from Iran was and is very real. He declined to go into precise details, but says many of those doing Iran's dirty work are gig economy actors. In this respect, Iran is copying its ally Russia, likewise accused of hiring petty criminals for sabotage operations in Britain and in Europe. As he continued, quote, Iran will hire useful idiots who may not even know who's pulling the strings. They'll use delivery drivers, criminals, people on low income, or the unemployed, anyone vulnerable to persuasion. That's what the left is doing right now. They gather up the useless idiots. And the thing about it is there's an island called Diego Garcia. It's in the Indian Ocean. It's kind of in between. It's east of Madagascar, south of India, and west of Australia. And it's kind of in between all of those. And Iran launched a missile at Diego Garcia. Iran has missiles that could theoretically reach London. They could certainly reach the more southern parts of Europe. But Europe doesn't want to do anything about it. Oh, we don't want to upset all the Muslims in our country. Well, I hate to tell you this, UK. Iran doesn't give a shit if you're standing by the sidelines. Switzerland, France, Spain, Italy, all of you countries. Iran doesn't give a shit. Iran looks at you as a bunch of cowardly chickens who have no backbone, and they will still attack you. They don't care. They don't care at all. So again, it's just like the left when they appease the criminals. Criminals don't ask you about your political affiliation. Iran doesn't give a shit if you get involved in the war. So if you didn't see the pictures, there's a picture of Kid Rock sitting out on his balcony by his pool and an Army Apache helicopter hovering right off of his deck. And of course, they tried to suspend the soldiers involved and all of that. And Pete Hegseth, the war secretary, came out and said, I'm lifting all of those. The helicopter pilots who flew over Kid Rock's southern White House will face no punishment. Carry on, patriots. That's kind of America in a nutshell. We're crazy and we got great weapons. But, the odd thing about it is where Kid Rock's house is, he routinely sees helicopters and greets them. It's not that big of a story, but I urge you to look up the pictures. It's very patriotic. The truth of the matter is that, that's what was missing from America for the longest time. We had no sense of humor. We had no backbone. We had no spine. We have all of these marvelous weapon packages, but we don't use them to try to affect change in the world. Iran is step one. I mean, everybody else kind of keeps to their own corner, and we can combat them through their cybercrime and their espionage and their gig economy terrorism. But Iran is actively paying people to go out there and murder people. Iran financed what happened on October 7th. Iran finances Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. And that it's time for that to end. We don't need to live in a world where people are launching rockets and hijacking ships and all of that. We don't. We need stability in this world. Maybe if we get some stability in this world and get some people at the controls who believe in, America first and helping our people and, standing up for yourself, providing for yourself, maybe we can get this country back on track. But before we do that, we got to stop being like California. So a couple things on California here. Headline, Coyote pounces on 4-year-old Carson boy in alarming attack caught on video. It's just a 4-year-old little kid playing out in Carson, which is pretty much city. I mean, there are pockets of kind of wetlands and areas next to washes and stuff. So I guess the coyotes are burrowed in there. But our policies of just allowing Mother Nature to take care of itself, yeah. No, Mother Nature is a vengeful bitch. And you leave her unchecked, and this is the kind of shit that happens. Yeah, I know it's rare, okay? But we see this with, ever-increasing bear populations, coyote populations. God forbid we ever get a growing wolf population here. Ugh, we're doomed. Another one, Department of Homeland Security slams California sanctuary county after mom allegedly murdered by 2 Honduran nationals. Yeah, they took a shotgun. One of them was the baby mama to this lady who was killed, Kimberly Chirones Flores. Shot her with a shotgun. And what makes this so irritating is that he was arrested in 2018 and in 2019, and California just let him go. They just allowed him to walk out and be a free man and go right back into the community. And now it has cost, a woman her life and a kid, a 5-year-old kid, its mom. I mean, these are preventable things, but more than just being preventable, these are the kinds of philosophies that are so fucking dangerous. I understand wanting to give people second chances, but you can't just willy-nilly give people second chances. Another headline. Chevron threatens to leave California over taxes and regulations, warning the state is playing a dangerous game. Yeah. Guy that was interviewed, Walls here. Yeah, Walls. We know that name. They need to abandon the tax on refineries, or they won't have any refineries in 10 years. If it stays this way, Chevron will be gone in 10 years for sure. We won't be able to make it. And it is a very, very dangerous game that is being played. California, although we have a lot of our own oil, has a heavy reliance on foreign imports. 70% come from foreign imports. And Chevron, who sources from regions experiencing shortages, they don't see how they're going to open up refineries in California, let alone maintain and continue them. But it isn't just that. It's all the environmental regulations, the taxes that hit them, right? If Chevron was to leave, we would lose 34% of our manufacturing here. And we're on an energy island. We, unlike other places, there's no pipelines going through California. We're scared of pipelines. We would rather put our oil on a ship and drive it across the ocean. It's ridiculous. Our politicians here in California are so enamored with their ideologies. They literally believe that if we shift our carbon footprint to, let's say, the Netherlands, that changes things. But meanwhile, they keep talking about global climate change, global warming, global cooling. Global. It doesn't matter where the pollution comes from. Every time the United States or Europe shuts down production, China just ramps it up. Other countries just ramp it up. We cut out, UK cut out like coal production. In Germany and France, they cut out coal production. But the numbers doubled in China because they're still growing and we're buying everything. We're giving them all of our fucking money. And if we don't give it to them, they just steal it. But anyhow, back to it. We're an energy island. We have set ourselves up in such a piss poor way that we could theoretically just run out of gasoline here in California. Oh, great. We'll use electric. Yeah, well, we can't produce that either, and we can't put nuclear power plants online. And again, here we go again with their ideologies. Troubling conditions along LA River near Griffith Park raises safety concerns. This is a homeless advocate and a clinical therapist, Cameron Flanagan. The gang members, they carry backpacks with tools, ghost guns, dangerous. Some of these people have been living by the river for 13 years. This lady that they interviewed, Sarah, has been in the area on and off for more than a decade. There was a lady living in the storm drain. Yeah. She was asked, that Sarah that they interviewed was asked about, has she ever been offered housing? And she said, yes, I have been offered housing, but I choose not to stay. I did. It's just not for me. I would just come back out here. I just like it. Of course, the clinical therapist and homeless advocate Flanagan says it's a refuge for people who feel disconnected from traditional systems. They have disconnected themselves. Okay? They have. These people are not able to take care of themselves. Camping in a riverbed is not taking care of yourself. And we're pouring so much money into it, but we can't come up with a system. Why don't we just, like I've said before, we could build a big building to house people and to treat people. And we could have a bunch of empty land for RVs and people who want to live in tents. But we could help them. We can get them into these situations where we can at least try to get them healthy, try to get them mentally stable, try to get them sober. But we could try. Or we could do what they do in California. We could just put up our hands and go, well, it's compassion to let them live on the streets. Yeah, it's compassionate to let somebody shit in a bucket. Sure. So a climate executive warns that California is functionally bankrupt. Yeah. This guy Friedberg. We owe so much in pensions. And the amount of pension that is owed versus what's coming in is about $250 billion to $1 trillion off. Our Supreme Court here in California says that, once you've offered retirement benefits, you can never restructure the retirement benefits. And I do agree with that, okay? I agree that if you were promised a pension, you deserve a pension. I have no problem with that. I wish all of us had better pension plans, but we're not all union. But here's where the rub is. If you are losing a lot of money to fraud, and then you're wasting money on things like the bullet train, and then you're spending money on crazy-ass ideological projects that really are doomed to failure, that's where your money's going. That's what needs to be tightened up. Think about this. You have this Nick Shirley running around. And just between Minneapolis and Los Angeles, he has exposed billions in fraud. Hospice fraud. There's a building in Los Angeles where there's something like 42 hospices registered. Some of them are registered overseas. It's ridiculous. It's rampant fraud. If that kind of fraud was happening in a red city or a red district, I'm sure some liberal would be out there trying to expose it, but they're not going to find it. And I know why they won't find it. If you believe man should, to the best of their ability, stand on their own feet, like the conservatives, then you manage every penny that goes out. Every penny that the government issues, you're checking it and you're checking it and you're rechecking it. But if you believe that the government should bail out every loser and scammer, then you don't watch every penny, let alone even every million. And now I know there are a lot of people out there that, despite their best efforts, need public assistance. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the fraud. And quite frankly, when all you're doing is running ideological programs that benefit your friends and family, you don't look at the money. We've seen it countless times. They just keep issuing checks to people who are running hospices at the same building as somebody else is running a hospice. These people are not even committing crime smartly, but because California doesn't care, they don't care. And now Trump has appointed J.D. Vance, VP Vance, as the fraud czar. Fraud is a huge problem in this country, all right? I don't really need to cover any more on that. We know it. We know the money. But that's the kind of money that could balance out budgets. And getting rid of pork and fraud. See, what am I railing against? Am I railing against Democrats here or liberals or far left people? Am I railing against Republicans? No, I'm railing against the fraud, the corruption, and the pork, period. It just so happens that the biggest numbers we see are coming out of blue cities, blue counties, blue states. Where are the liberals fighting back? Where are they pointing out what, somebody in Texas is doing? Maybe there are some back-ended deals in red counties, but it's not the same. And it's not fraud in the same areas because they care about every penny. So really quickly here, we'll just catch up on some of the liberal idiocy that's running rampant out there. Mamdani, the New York City mayor, has faced criticism from local politicians and onlookers on social media over comments he made that critics says places blame on guns rather than criminals in an incident involving the shooting death of a 7-month-old child. Yeah, 7 months, not even a year old, in Brooklyn. Yeah, there was a guy on a moped who just opened fire on a street and a stray bullet went through and killed this Corey Patterson Moore, 7 years old. Mamdani's quote, "This is not our first family to know this pain. Too many children have never grown up into becoming adults, to parents who have had to bury those they love the most. We cannot accept it as normal in our city. We cannot grow numb to this pain. And today is a devastating reminder of how much work there is to be done to combat gun violence." Yeah. As one person said, if only New York had stricter gun laws. Manhattan Institute fellow Raphael Mangawa said his references frame it as a gun problem. This is a gang problem. Just like the killing of Richard Williams, an 83-year-old Air Force vet who was shoved onto the subway tracks by an illegal immigrant with a long criminal history. See? They don't want to blame the gangs. They don't want to blame the illegal aliens. They want to blame the gun. That's their rhetoric. That's their soapbox. It's so dumb. Chicago mayor doubles down on illegal alien assault at a No Kings rally. Oh, God, No Kings. What a fraud that is. If you participate in No Kings, you are fraudulent. Okay? Gavin Newsom and some of the Gavin Newsom is the biggest king out there. He disregards voters. He does whatever he wants. He spends whatever he wants. And then he blames everybody but himself. But anyhow, Brandon Johnson vowed to stop assault on immigrants after the Gorman was buried. At the same time, this Sheridan Gorman, who was just walking down by a lighthouse out on a beach, she disturbed an illegal alien who opened fire on her. Yeah, an illegal immigrant from Colombia. Johnson said at the rally, we have to end the assaults against immigrants. We have seen election shift around this country. So things are happening. We've signed multiple executive orders to force ICE out of the city of Chicago. Wow. So that's what you want. You don't want illegal immigrants being sent back. You don't know. No, you don't want any of that. And who's funding all this? Look at this. This No Kings bullshit. 500 groups with $3 billion in revenues are behind the No Kings protest and the communist call for revolution. Because communism, socialism, it only works if you're already on top. And these people are already on top. This billionaire, Singham, Neville Roy Singham, an American tech tycoon, an avowed communist who lives in China now. I'm sure he's fine in China. He's not like the Uyghurs, enslaved making cell phones. No. But you know what? If you get your little revolution, you little leftist wimp boys, you're going to find out that a dictator is way worse than a president. You are being led by people who are making money off the so-called revolution. There is no revolution. All right? You are being manipulated. That's the long, short, and skinny of it all. You're being manipulated. They don't want what's best for you. Capitalism, democracy, constitutional republic, whatever you want to call America, it's not perfect, but it's damn near the best thing we've got. All right? I know that you can list countries, Denmark, places like that. Very low population. Very highly educated population. We don't have that here. Thanks to Joe Biden, we got like 14 million people, a percentage of which is just sucking off the public teat right now. And just to close it out, I support Trump's plan to get rid of birthright citizenship. I think if you're here illegally, I don't think your kids deserve to be citizens. It's a loophole that we need to close. Now, I also advocate that we make it easier for normal people to immigrate here. People who can't maybe afford everything. We need programs to allow people to come here to work and to better their lives. But at the same time, creating all these loopholes or just kicking open the border is not the answer. It never will work. Well, back in February, I talked about Brad Reese's, the grandson of Reese's founder, H.B. Reese's, who was complaining about how Hershey's had changed the chocolate. They were using these chemicals. It was gross, whatever. He threw the bag of food out. Well, I guess Hershey has responded, but not directly to Brad. They are, as they say, plans to shake the company out of its big profit-minded ways. I'm all for corporations making a profit. That's what pays people's salaries. But if it means that our chocolate is going to taste like shit, no thank you. Make a nickel less per candy bar and put real chocolate in. I know it's hard to do, but why are we not finding solutions for that? Why are we not finding alternative sources for chocolate, oil, all of these things that we need? Why are we relying on China? Why are we relying on an unstable Africa? Why are we putting conditions on where our chocolate can come from? Come on, let's just, make America chocolate again. So the last thing I want to talk about is this is happening over in Hampshire, over there in England, near the village of Twyleford on the river Itchen. There is a capybara named Samba who escaped from a zoo and has been roaming the countryside for the last 10 days. Actually, more than that. I don't know if it's been caught. I didn't see anything about it being captured, but they're using these humane badger traps baited with melons. Yeah, if you watch any YouTube, you know that capybaras love melons. I love capybaras. I wish we could all be capybaras, just kind of like chill. Kind of like we'll deal with danger when danger appears, but we're not going to treat everything as though it's danger. That would be a nice way. I wish we could live in that world. But, I want to thank you for watching if you've made it this far. If you didn't make it this far, you're not hearing this message. I'm just trying to kind of shake things up so people can see the alternate sides of things, and maybe we could pull together as American voters and start voting for people who actually have our best interests at heart. That is really what my genuine desire is for America to get back to electing people who are going to do a good job, not just because they have the right letter, not just because we recognize their name. I mean, holy cow, Maxine Waters is still running for her post again? Wow. If that doesn't tell you that things need to change, nothing will. I'm Kid Copious on Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. And, turn it up and dance it out.